Hello and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. If the advertising and marketing of sports betting and iGaming brands isn't taking center stage when discussing the Canadian gambling industry these days, it at least has its name on the marquee as a co-star. On today's podcast, we're tackling the hot button issue from a bit of a different place by having a conversation with two members of the leadership team for a company that's embedded inside the business of gaming in this country since 2009. Global TV Experts provides operators with guidance on their advertising campaigns, not only here in the True North Strong and Free, but globally as well. Nick Wood is the Global Director of Client Strategy and Growth, and Jenny Croswell is the Managing Director of GTE's Canadian Operations, having joined the company at the beginning of the year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later with Jenny. But first, Nick and Jenny, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thanks, you, Steve. Thanks for having us.
No, my pleasure. And Nick, I just want to start with you and just, this is the first time we've had a chance to speak with you and Jenny. And I'd like to just start by simply asking you about Global TV Experts, the evolution of the company's work in the gaming industry, and also your own background in this industry.
Yeah, sure. So we are a independent media agency, and we plan and buy international TV campaigns. In Canada, we've actually grown with our clients, and we buy not only TV, but radio, out-of-home, cinema, and also we've been involved in partnerships as well with Jackpot City. So in a nutshell, we kind of use our agency expertise and our experience to place our clients' ads in front of the right people at the right time to drive the best business outcomes for them, really. That's what we do. We love iGaming clients. They are, like us, driven by measurable outcomes. So if a campaign isn't working, they'll turn it off like that. We make sure that, our sustained growth is kind of evidence of consistently delivering really good business outcomes for our clients. And all our results are kind of directly aligned with the operator's business objectives. In this case, normally FTDs, cost per FTD, so first-time deposits and cost per first-time deposits. As you said, we've operated in the Canadian market since 2009. We currently work with Jackpot City, Botano, Casino Days, all of whom showing significant signs of growth, well above the market growth, it has to be said, but about double, I would say. So in me personally, I've had over 30 years of experience in media across various verticals. I joined Global TV Experts in 2022, and my current focus is really on designing and executing international above-the-line campaigns, particularly with a TV-centric approach to achieve both media and business goals. That's it. That's what we do.
Hey, Jenny, you're right. As I mentioned earlier, you joined the company in January, but you're certainly you're not a newcomer to the media industry.
I'm not a newcomer, but by any stretch. I've been in the Canadian media industry for about 25 years. So started back in 2001. So I've seen a lot of evolution in the industry over that time. Joined Global TV Experts, GTE Canada, in January to really support our clients here and grow and scale the business in the Canadian market.
Nick, I'll start with you on this one, and we did a call in advance of this podcast just to get to know each other a little bit. But it's something to my advantage. I mean, I'm still a bit of a traditional media consumer. My wife and I watch a lot of shows on TV. Obviously, watch a lot of sports. We've certainly seen somewhat of a shift in advertising dollars to social and digital media, probably more so than ever over the past decade. And I think there's maybe sometimes a misperception that that's come at the expense of television advertising. And as you mentioned to me on that call last week, there's still a lot of value for brands and companies to advertise on television.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the myth that TV is dying, it really isn't. And if we just take linear TV, it's still reaching 83% of all adults in Canada on a weekly basis. Okay, so the numbers are there. It's still a broadcast media. It's changing. People are switching to streaming, but it still has a really good base, linear TV. And I think if you want a real good proof of effectiveness, you only have to look at the operator's spends on TV year on year. We've seen that increase by 8%, 2025 versus 2024. So, that's a $10 million increase. It's not small figures at all. Reality is, in 2025, there's over $119 million spent on linear TV advertising alone. So, and that's within iGaming. So it is, and as I said before, iGaming clients, they don't spend if it doesn't work. So reality is it's there, and it's, it can be, such a powerful medium. It still is the biggest screen in the house, and it still has a massive impact. I think operators kind of tend to believe that it's a pure branding medium in some respect as well. So they'll look at it and they'll go, well, I know it's doing a great job, but I can't really measure what it's doing. And how we've grown is to show operators that it can be both like a performance media, i.e. drive really measurable outcomes, and a really strong branding tool as well at the same time. So whenever we turn a TV campaign on, the first thing that we're looking at with our clients is within the first week is what's happening on that TV influence traffic, direct visits to your site, brand PPC, organic search, and organic app downloads. Okay, if we're seeing an uplift on those, that's great, and it takes time. But it takes a couple of weeks. It's generally up and running and delivering really strong results. So, looking at that, we can then work out what that incremental increase is. So we go turn TV on, and that enables us to calculate a cost per FTD because we know how many campaigns, we know how much we're spending, we know the incremental uplifts, and from that we can calculate what those efficiencies are. And that's where it becomes really interesting because, and we might talk about this a little bit later, but in terms of, it really can compete with the digital space, especially, affiliates, etc. The way that's kind of the overall, and that's how we approach looking at it from an overall perspective. We also do something called spot attribution. So every spot that goes out on your TV campaign is then matched back against visits or app downloads. And that enables us, when we aggregate all that data together, we can say, what's the best performing creative? What's the best performing station? What's the best performing day of week? And we just implement changes as the campaign goes on. Now, what we've seen, actually, if this is done properly and we're all working together in partnership with our clients, because we need their data as well to tell us what's happening in terms of FTDs, we can look at visit data. But what we've noticed is we've seen campaigns improve by up to almost 40% in terms of cost per FTD, right? Our biggest challenge, where we kind of steal most of our budget, if you like, out of the digital space is against affiliates. Affiliates in Canada can be really, really expensive. It's such a competitive marketplace. If you want quality traffic from affiliates, you're probably paying between $700 and $900 CAD. I know I can deliver on TV a cost per FTD between $300 to $500. So it becomes a bit of a no-brainer in that space, yeah? And we're able to show, if we show clients, then it's amazingly, suddenly they're quite happy to switch their budgets over and move budgets accordingly because it's all performance-based. The other thing that TV delivers is quality. It's a really high-quality player comes in. Better retention, better lifetime value, and it's really interesting as well in terms of, we've seen that 8% increase in terms of overall spend on TV. Amongst our clients, we've seen a 25% increase in spend, in TV spend. And again, they're hard taskmasters. They won't be spending if they weren't working. So we proved it works. We proved it can deliver better quality, cheaper cost per FTDs and bigger scale than affiliates or generic PPC or other digital routes. So that's kind of where we're coming from. I think the other thing you've got to remember is it's a misconception on TV as well that TV is really expensive. I know people are knocking AI ads together. They may not be the prettiest brand ads, but they do a job. If you're a new challenger brand to market and you want to get out there and you want to start grabbing that market share in a market that's growing like 30%, year on year, then you can get an ad made for as little as $5,000 in AI, even less than that. So there is very little barrier to entry in terms of that capital cost. And once all these things are brought together, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer. And I've dealt with, clients who are so TV skeptic, and then I've shown them how it works, and I've shown them the strength of it, delivering scale and cost efficiencies. And they're almost like converts. People who wouldn't even, TV's dead, no one watches TV anymore, and all the rest of it. And then suddenly they're going, well, actually, do you think we could spend a bit more if I took 200 grand away from affiliates and put it to you? So that's what I really love about this job, is just showing, delivering value for people and showing them that there are traditional routes still work as long as you measure them properly, and whatever you do in this space, it has to be measured and it has to be optimized. So
it's interesting. When I left the Globe Mail in 2009 to join Yahoo Canada and build a Canadian sports property there, and at that time we were starting to see advertising dollars for newspapers start to shift to digital. And I think at that time, once I put on my Yahoo hat, it was trying to convince agencies and brands from taking your television dollars and spending it on digital. So that's 16 years ago now. Jenny, in terms of the Canadian landscape, I'm kind of curious how segmented that advertising is. I believe if you look at live sports, I think live sports is still very popular with advertisers, but I wonder, are advertisers still spending on primetime shows in the evenings, your NCIS shows and FBI's and your comedies, comedy series, and how I think we're going to talk about news a little bit later, but how is there a segmentation to that advertising spend?
A little bit. So linear TV does skew a little bit older, and that's really where you're seeing some of the younger viewers migrating over to more streaming. But there is still definitely a mass appeal for television, and it's measurable, as Nick said. With respect to sports, that is definitely a premium property across the board, really. And you can see that because a lot of the streamers are actually bidding for the sports rights. So you'll see NHL on Amazon as an example. Netflix has NFL broadcasts. So really that's what everybody wants. That's the golden goose, so to speak, is the sports broadcast, because people are really watching those types of programs live on the big screen. But overall, there's still a huge demand for TV, linear television, although it is shifting slightly to the streaming landscape. So really, when we go to market, we're looking at a holistic strategy that captures video from a linear standpoint and a streaming standpoint as well, so that you're capturing all the viewers on the spectrum of age and behavior as well.
Yeah, and sorry.
Go ahead, next. Go ahead.
Just to say that, CTV, or what we call connected TV, the streaming TV that you watch on the big screen, on the TV, that's really interesting to me, because it's kind of taking TV back to how it used to be, where we were like, when we were growing up, if you like, where it was a point of view. To extent, streaming services now are releasing things on a weekly basis. They're not binging everything together like they used to. But most importantly, it's non-skippable. So what you get is you get a really nice environment that people will pay attention to. You can't skip the ads. You can't fast forward them. You have to watch them. So it is almost like TV how it used to be. It's kind of gone full circle in a weird sort of way. And we're seeing, results that we're seeing off the back of CTV campaigns, we're advertising. They're really close. Although the CPM, the cost per thousand, the cost of actually buying the airtime is 5 times more than linear. Actually, the results and the cost per FTDs we're getting off it are very close to linear TV, because people are watching and they can't get away. They are gripped. They're stuck in that space, if you like, and forced to watch your ad. So yeah, we like it a lot. I think Jenny and I, the thing we most struggle with is actually just getting that balance right. because especially in things like iGaming, the casino space, it's very much an older, probably slightly more female mix. And in terms of profit values, that's where the profit value is as well for the operators. So yes, you want UCTV to reach those younger audiences, but they're not as profitable, and they are, and the deposit values are lower. So it's all about balance, and that's the trick, that's the skill for us at the moment.
Is your iGaming platform ready for market expansion? Bede Gaming is ready to support your needs across jurisdictions with a SOC 2 compliant platform, scalable multi-tenant infrastructure, and unlimited configurability. Book a meeting with Bede's team at the upcoming SBC Summit in Toronto and future-proof your growth plan. As I mentioned at the top, and I'm sure you're both following what's going on right now in Canada. We have, there's a bill within the House of Commons to create a new framework around sports betting advertising. We're recording this podcast a week after a Liberal MPP in Ontario introduced a private members bill to ban online gambling advertising. On our previous podcast, we had two researchers on the show who've just produced a study on the effects of advertising on men under 30. And so there's a lot of advertising is under the spotlight right now. Maybe start with you, Jenny. Like what role, if any, does global TV experts play with an operator or a supplier or any other stakeholder in the gambling industry in terms of that media spend and perhaps the type of advertising that they're going to spend that money on?
I think we really help with our experience. We really help the operators navigate through some of this complexity. I mean, we work in about 40 different countries, so there's different regulations in all these countries. So we're definitely up to speed on what's going on and making recommendations on how we can navigate it. I think you mentioned a couple of the bills. I think they're important. Where they end up in the end, we'll see. But I think it definitely signals that there's an appetite to regulate the framework, which we're doing now, but we really help our clients move through that complexity. Maybe Nick can add to that too with his experience over the course of the years in many markets.
Absolutely. I think, we're talking about Bill 107 here and Bill S211.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I think, one which is a complete ban, which I'm not in favour of, and you'd be not surprised to hear that. And the other one is kind of like a slightly more restricted approach, which actually, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that, because I think there are things that can be done to improve and to regulate and just to make it a bit safer for everyone. Absolutely. Always, we should be looking at it. But let's just look at it two ways. First off, if there's a blanket ban, what would that mean to the industry itself? Okay, so straight away you would take $116 million out of TV revenue, about 10 million out of home, and about 7 million out of radio. Gone. That, I don't know where you would get that back. I'll be brutally honest with you. That would disappear, and that would then impact jobs, content, quality of content, in the long term, especially with Trump's tariffs coming into play at the moment. The economic outlook in Canada is hard. So, you're probably looking at further pressure on your welfare system. So, and then lastly, I think in terms of just pure kind of, you are taking money out of Canadian businesses and you're putting money into the tech giants' pockets. Okay. And so that's the first kind of port of call in terms from a media revenue point of view. I think in terms of consumers, it's really interesting. You talked about 18 to, you were talking about young men basically, like under 30, etc. That absolutely is the biggest, the highest risk, the most problematic. Men 18 to 34 are the biggest problem gamblers. Yeah. I think I've seen a stat recently, and I mean, I'm pleased that, probably I'm being quoted on this, but something like almost 1 in 4 reported issues within that demographic of problem gambling. I think if you were to do a complete ban, what would that mean? It means that you'd push it online, basically. And breaching online is a major problem at the moment. Okay. And I just don't know how you could police that. You know, you'd have the grey market would and the grey and the black market would just take over that vacuum, because what you're doing is you're putting all the stuff online. You just can't monitor that level of social activity and the level of promotions that might be on display or whatever it might be. So that's the first port of call. So I think the other thing that we have to be careful of when we're talking about blanket bans is, how do licensed operators get their message across that we are trusted and that we're fair and, you know, we're going to be, we look after our consumers? You're not going to do that on a tiny little ad online. And to tell you the truth, that would get lost. So straight away, the impact, you know, that money from the money from the operators, the licensed operators at the moment, that goes towards responsible gambling would be affected. Okay, you're pushing people online, and those 18 to 34-year-olds are going to be even more exposed to bad practice, black market, grey market, even. So that to me is a massive concern, and that's why I would want to keep it. You know, that's why I want to keep. I don't think we should be doing a blanket ban on gambling. I think the other thing is, what's really interesting, I was reading like a 2024 study that said that, you know, by the European Casino Association, I think it was, and examined markets which really restrictive advertising regimes. It found that unlicensed casinos were actually taking 70% of online revenue in those jurisdictions. So it doesn't, and that kind of backs up what I was saying before, because you have a situation where you just can't police it effectively, and you can't see what's being said. So yeah, that's what I'm really concerned about that, to be honest with you.
Nick, I just wonder, are you seeing, you must be seeing this in other parts of the world where Global TV Experts does business too. I mean, we've, you know, we know in Australia there's been a push by government there to ban sports betting advertising during games, and I think that's happening in other countries. Maybe I think Spain already has a policy in place. There's been a lot of talk in the UK over the last 2 years about advertising and placing restrictions on that. So this certainly isn't an issue that's unique to Canada. No,
it's not unique to Canada at all. And I think what's really interesting, let's take the UK, okay? The UK, you turn on your TV now, I would say there's a huge majority, and unfortunately I don't have the stats to hand, but a large percentage of the TV ads you see, or the connected TV ads you see that reflect gambling, are safer gambling messages. Still a massive market, still driving response. And this is what's really interesting. This is what we found, because we're able to measure our creative. We can put a responsible gambling ad out there, and we can see what activity it drives or what app downloads it drives quite easily. When we aggregate all our kind of non-responsible gambling or brand advertising together in Canada and compare it to our regular gaming, responsible gaming advertising, the difference between the two in terms of driving visits is 5%. 5%. So they both do the similar job. And I think operators almost see, and that's why I'm always talking, whenever I talk to operators, I always say, well, look, you know, they're very reticent to advertise on TV with a safer gambling message. And I always say to them, well, here are the facts. They actually push it just as well as a normal ad would, if you like. And the reason being, I think operators see it almost like a necessary evil and a little bit of a box tick. And you see a lot of spend going into out of home, where they don't think it's going to do any damage. Yeah. But the reality is there's still, you know, you can still advertise on TV and position yourselves as a responsible and a trusted operator, and you've still got a really strong result in terms of driving visits to your site. So I think it's weird, this kind of dichotomy between what the operators believe, that it slows everything down as a blocker, and what the consumers actually think and see when they see the ads, which actually is probably, I like these guys. They're not trying to really hard push. They're showing the opportunity to me, but in a safe and secure way, in a responsible way. Actually, yeah, I might go with those instead of the black market Facebook ad that I've just seen 2 minutes ago whilst I was waiting for my TV program to load up.
Yeah, Jenny, I think that's the criticism. I think Nick makes a great point. I think that's the criticism that I hear about responsible gambling messaging. That's almost like an afterthought, and some people will point to the fine, the 6-point text at the bottom of a television ad about gambling responsibly, and call 1-888-0000. And it feels to me that there hasn't been enough. I don't want to say effort's a bad word, but it just there's not enough being put into responsible gambling messaging, that it's almost to Nick's point that it's done as an afterthought, or because operators have to do that. And I wonder if you're getting any of that feedback, or you have any insight on that from following the industry here in Canada.
A little bit, but I will say that I think there's a misconception that some of the non-responsible gaming ads, so the regular operator ads, aren't regulated, but there is a body in place that regulates any ad that you see on television. Right. So it's Think TV. They will actually approve the gambling ad that's going to be aired on linear television. And in order for the broadcasters to accept your ad, you need that approval from Think TV. So there is a regulation process in place before a consumer sees any ads on linear TV. So there is regulation in place. And I think, like I said, there's a bit of a misconception that you're just putting whatever you want on air, but it needs to be approved before broadcasters will accept it.
Yeah, and again, the reason why this is such a hot button issue is everybody has an opinion on it, and they're also, we know that Think TV, they've reported in the past that there's been very little backlash coming through Think TV to gambling ads, so they aren't getting those complaints. And we know the AGCO took the step about a year and a half into the Ontario market of changing the rules around the use of athletes in advertising. So now you can only use an athlete if you're around responsible gambling messaging. The Canadian Gaming Association came out with a responsible gaming advertising code this year for its members. So there is a lot of this stuff, but I think Jenny touched on it a little bit. I think there's still is some confusion in the marketplace about what a regulated operator is and a legal operator. And I think that gets even fuzzier outside of Ontario, where you have private operators who refer themselves as gray market operators. If you talk to provincial lottery and gaming corporations, they refer to those operators as illegal operators. And again, we see it all the time. If I'm watching a hockey game on Sportsnet Pacific, and it's the same broadcast feed that's in Ontario, we're going to see ads pop up. Like I see Play Alberta ads sitting on my television, sitting in my living room in Kincardine, and I know people in Grand Prairie are seeing FanDuel ads, even though FanDuel's not yet a registered operator in Alberta. So that kind of puts more mud into the water. Yeah, it's confusing. Let's not beat around the bush. .net's free to play, .ca, it probably needs a little bit of federal intervention here to sort this out. But I think again it kind of comes back, you say you see these ads, and actually in a weird way it shows the power of TV, because there's a lot of wastage there, okay? Because you're buying a national feed, you don't have any choice, you have to buy it. But you are still getting enough players within your licensed territories, Ontario, it's going to be Alberta soon, to be able to drive a really efficient cost per FTD. So I would love to see it, spread out all across the country and be really clear, and that'd be great. Unfortunately, we're not in that space at the moment. But
it could definitely do with clearing up. I'm not pretending it's not a little bit messy.
Jenny, are you getting our operators that their clients that you have? Are they saying, are they indicating that they want to pull back and their advertising spend because of what's going on with these bills in Canada and Ontario right now? Are you seeing any of that?
No, not really. So, and as Nick referenced earlier on, the year-over-year spend is actually increasing. So there's a lot of competition in the market. So the clients want to ensure that they have a larger share of voice to compete against those other operators. So no, to date, we haven't seen anybody scaling back.
And I would expect we're going to see a spike with the Alberta market launching on July 13th. We're probably going to see a spike not coincidentally at a pretty busy time in the sports calendar, especially with the World Cup coming to North America in June.
Yeah, absolutely. I think off the top of my head, I think there's maybe 15 operators now that are officially registered in Alberta. So I think that's definitely something we'll see incremental spend into that market, which is great for the broadcasters. I think we talked about when we were on the call last week, just about the opportunity for the gambling advertising, and if that were to go away, what kind of gap that would leave in the broadcasters' revenue margins. Really, when the gaming legislation came into Ontario, that was a big influx of dollars into the broadcast market, which we hadn't seen for years. It's very rare that a new category comes into the market and new advertising dollars come into the market. Typically, it's a shift share between broadcasters, but this was a new influx of dollars, which was a bit unprecedented.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue and a good time to get into the topic, Jenny. It just, as we talked about on this platform and also in the newsletter for the better part of 4 years now, when the Ontario market launched in 2022, I mean, we were still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. This industry provided a lifeline to media companies with the revenue that came in, especially for television networks. And we've got a new study out by the Canadian Media Means Business Group around I guess the effect of any drop in advertising revenue. And as someone who spent the better part of his career working as a journalist, I see what's going on around us right now with not just national journalists. I think Bell Media just reported its news division lost $40 million last year, but just as big a concern for me is what's going on with local media and seeing what's happened to community newspapers, small towns, daily newspapers. For me, there's really serious concerns around accountability. How do you hold councils and boards of education and chambers of commerce and other businesses accountable without journalists? And the simple answer is you can't. And so if you, again, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the federal government for media companies that if this bill does go through, and I think every indication is that Bill S-211 is going to get passed. That I think media networks are going to stand up and they're going to be objecting to this, or at least they're going to have a say around this bill.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a huge challenge in the Canadian media industry with dollars leaking, I would say, to the US and the big tech companies. So one of the stats in the Canadian Media Means Business that you referenced is that 94% roughly of digital spend in Canada is going out of the market to some of those big tech giants. So really, it's an industry challenge, and we need to solve for that somehow. Within the media industry, a lot of agencies have taken a pledge to ensure that they're investing in Canadian media. At GTE Canada, we do that from a traditional media standpoint. The majority of our dollars are being invested with Canadian publishers and Canadian broadcasters, but it's a big industry challenge. And if we don't solve for it, then we're going to see a real degradation of our Canadian media, journalism, newsrooms, assets, everything. And I mean, the digital sales tax that was tried a couple of years ago, that's been scrapped. So we really need to find solutions to keep the dollars in the Canadian market.
The one thing, Nick, with television and radio too, that there feels to me that there are checks and balances that you don't see in digital media. And I'm not a social media junkie, but when I scroll across Instagram in the evenings to see what my kids have posted or family and friends, I would say, especially the last 6 months, I've just been bombarded with phony casino ads. Places that will slap a fake Woodbine Entertainment logo on a casino, and it's a phony. I know it's a phony casino because I cover this industry. But a lot of people, if you look at these ads, you would think nothing of it. You would think, oh, I'll sign up here and I can play some casino games. But you're doing that with an unregulated operator and asking for trouble. So it still feels that there aren't those guardrails put in place around social media platforms that you have with traditional media.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I was saying earlier about the blanket bans. You're just going to see a massive explosion of that. Yeah, because it is so difficult to police, and I think it's like Jen was saying about the hoops you have to jump through to get an ad on TV. I would say it's probably the UK. I always thought was really, really oppressive. You had to cross all your T's and dot all your I's and have all your evidence there before we could even get near the approvers, if you like, of the TV ads. It's very similar in Canada. It's really rigorous, and to me, it's almost like they used to say, it's not quite so true nowadays, but as seen on TV. Yeah, do you remember that roundel that was always slammed on an ad? And to me, that was proof of trust. The ad had gone through a really rigorous process, and the company wasn't making blatantly, wrong calls in terms of the product they were selling. So I think that's hopefully. I think it is being policed, social media in Canada, to a certain extent, and people are able to report, and if they see something they don't like, you can complain to ADCO, and they will do something. They will call the operator up about it, and they have fined operators for breaching. But if you take that away and you just force everyone to go down that channel, it's so difficult to police, because it's not like it's a TV ad. That some operators might say, the black market operator might run an ad for a day and pull it before it's seen. Yeah, TV ads are on there for a month or longer, so they have to be, it has to be fully justified, and that's my biggest concern, I think, really. And I think you're right. Talking about, I've seen it in crypto as well. If you look at the amount of crypto ads or influencers that are making just blatantly outrageous claims, and people are buying into that, especially young people are buying into that. That's what's really worrying for me. So, I don't want to see that happening. The crypto space kind of being translated into the gambling space in Canada, which might well happen.
Jenny and Nick, I'm hoping this is a fair question, but I just wanted the two of you, if you've seen any trends or just shifts in the kind of advertising. I mean, we know in Ontario, for example, when the market first launched here, there was a lot of sports betting advertising. Sports betting or gaming operators did partnerships deals with the sports nets and TSNs to integrate sports betting content in the broadcast. I think we've seen a couple of shifts since market launch where there's been a pullback of advertising, but there's also been a shift on the more online casino advertising. Yeah. Jenny, am I hitting the nail on the head here? And have you noticed any other trends? And I just wonder, as we head towards Alberta's launch, what kind of advertising we can expect to see?
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. There's definitely more casino gaming advertising. We've seen that within our own client portfolio as well. I'm sure Nick has a few stats that he can rattle off the top of his head. We are definitely seeing there's a shift. Even operators that offer both a sportsbook and a casino gaming platform, we're seeing a shift to the casino gaming.
I think, you have to remember, this is a casino market. Okay. 84% of cash wagers are on casino in Canada, which is crazy. If you look at, in the UK, it's a football market, right? So it's all about, sports betting, etc. over there. But here, I would say that growth and that 30% growth in cash wages is purely driven by casino. Sports actually on a par or slightly down. So what we're seeing is the big operators, the BetMGM, the FanDuels, etc., are switching. They're still running sportsbook, but every month we're seeing new casino ads, new iGaming casino ads come into play. So, and that's where, the opportunity is in the market, I'll be honest with you. And, when we're talking to our clients, and we are pretty much all of them to a company are saying, look, yes, we will run sports, but reality is a lot of the big sports programs, etc., already covered by like long-term existing deals with FanDuel, etc. So we can't get in there. We know that we can't really play around the edges, but what we can do is we can reach and make serious money on the casino side of it. So again, it's just increasing all the time. Certainly, when I first started working in this space, I would say it was a lot more sports than casino, actually, and it's just grown, and casinos just comes to the fore, and that's that's the market as it is. So if you do want to make money, you have to have at least a casino and a sportsbook and a casino offering.
And Jenny, have you seen any early indications, like, will Alberta be different, where maybe it's the same, where we now know in Ontario, from the reports that iGaming Ontario puts out every month, that about 85% of handle is coming from online casino and other iGaming products. So do you think for that reason, the 15 operators that we mentioned earlier, that they might focus more on their iGaming products as they lead up to market launch and promote their brands?
Potentially. I think we've seen operators across the gamut. So there's sportsbook operators as well as pure play casino operators there. So it will be interesting to see. But to Nick's point, a lot of the sports leagues are already locked up with sponsors. So it'll be challenging for some of these new operators that are coming into Alberta to expand beyond that. So I would say intuitively that it probably will be a casino lean when the Alberta market opens up.
Yeah.
Hey, just a couple more questions. One question I've been wrestling with lately is again, all the noise around advertising, and that's kind of, what will constitute advertising in these bills? And I'm probably asking the two of you to look into your crystal balls or whatever, or hazard a guess here. But for example, if you look at FanDuel's partnership with TSN, where that partnership has evolved, and the operator now is a presenting sponsor for the TSN Overdrive radio show in the afternoons, and they have integrated segments on their Sports Center news highlights broadcasts, and during the football season, FanDuel sponsors NFL segments, and part of that partnership will be advertising, will be commercial built into that too. But Nick, would all that be seen as advertising, or again, just your thoughts on is there like a true definition for advertising, or does a partnership make it a little bit more complicated?
What everyone wants, right, is localization. They want an association with a local Canadian team, or a sponsorship package that is seen as pretty, so they can position themselves as almost like the Canadian, a true Canadian operator in some ways. Okay, so and I think a really interesting, Jackpot City, when we were working with them, we were involved in the partnership with MLSE. Sorry, I can't get my words out. MLSE, and that was a sports, that was a casino massive casino operator, still is a massive player in the Canadian marketplace. But it was about, tying itself into a partnership with a local team that hopefully would position them more favorably in the consumer's minds. So it's all advertising. Yeah, it's all advertising. We pay for it, and it drives visits, etc., or raises your brand awareness. It's all advertising. And actually, what we find with a lot of our clients is there is a limit of spend on TV. There's a limit of spend on radio, whereby you just end up kind of cannibalizing your audience because you're hitting the same people again and again and again, and your frequency is just going up. So what you really want is you're trying to find new routes all the time. And sponsorship's a great one on TV. It's kind of the next step on from doing, normal linear ads or just normal spot ads that go out. We have, partnerships. I've talked about MLSE. That's really important. But that's probably, you're a pretty big established brands. And I think Betty have just taken over the MLSE sponsorship from Jackpot City. So again, you can see how it's working here. And it's all about just keeping ahead of the competitor pack to really competitor market and making sure that your advertising is effective. And when you're dealing with the partnerships and the sponsorships, you're not necessarily talking about your engine's probably running pretty optimally and you're getting all those registrations and FTDs that are coming in. What you're doing with the partnerships and sponsorships, you're reaching those incremental audiences. Slightly less likely to gamble, but might be persuaded. And because your engine's running so well and you're feeding your engine with all your FTDs that you need anyway, you can afford to do that because your blends at the end of the month will come out in the right in the right place in terms of scale and cost per FTD. But so yes, it's all advertising. It's just trying to find new audiences all the time, and that's what's tricky in Canada actually, is because you got 50 or 50 plus licensed operators in this space, all wanting that localization, all wanting that great association, but it's when you're operating at that level, it becomes expensive, and it's hard.
It's a really interesting question because I think, being in the business, we consider that all advertising. I'd be curious to see what the consumer thinks. And some of the information that I've read about the bills, they're talking more about the TV commercials within the sports broadcast. They haven't really, what I've seen, referenced anything outside of that, so the sponsorship. So I'm curious to see what the bill will actually look like and if there'll be limits are outside of programming. And that'll be really interesting because then the competition in those areas will be increased substantially if that's really the only place that you can advertise.
I wouldn't want to be doing a partnership deal when there's day part restrictions in place, or there's one spot you're allowed to run two advertisers in a football game, or in a basketball. My good Lord, it will be the price will rise massively. But I think what we will see, and it's probably quite a nice place to end up, is to say that you're more likely to see restrictions than an outright ban. And I think we'll see things like number of ads in the football games and the baseball games will come down, because I go to Canada a lot to see Jen and the team, and it is crazy. There's so many ads running, within those breaks. The same advertiser in the same break. That's crazy. How is that going to work? How is that going to work? Bearing in mind you have a market that isn't growing at the same rate as the casino. So everyone's just chasing the same buck. I think day part restrictions might well come into play as well to lessen the damage. And I'm not against that. So maybe, a ban on advertising before 8 p.m. or, running in the evening and across the board. I think probably where it will end up. I think an outright ban is very unlikely. I think the tax dollars are too high. I think that, where are the media, the owners, the broadcasters are struggling at the moment anyway. How are they going to get that revenue back? and it will have a direct impact on people's jobs, etc.
Yeah. Last question. I'll start with you on this one, Jenny. I'm always fascinated by just, we talk a lot about sports, but obviously, I wake up in the morning and my wife and I watch the CP24 morning show, and we see gambling ads pop up, or we're watching our shows in the evening and our sitcoms, and we see ads pop up then, and I want to get Nick's thoughts on this too, because I think in the UK, for example, which I'm sure at one time sports betting was very heavily male skewed, and online gaming has become obviously a lot more prevalent over the last 10 years. But here in Canada, Jenny, I just wonder, how are those decisions made on where operators want those advertised on want their commercials to appear? And I also wonder demographically, we know some operators have, Bede at the very beginning. Bede was kind of touting itself as a very female friendly operator. That strategy has shifted since then. But what convinces operators that they need to be on CP24 in the morning, or be on the View or the Social?
Yeah, a couple things. So with the sports book, I would say it is a little bit more male skewed, but maybe not as much as you would think, because there are a lot of females watching, including myself, watching sports. I'm a huge Jays fan. Actually ran into Louis Varland last night,
oh, cool.
which is pretty awesome. Yeah. And then the casino, slightly more female skew. I think Nick mentioned that. But again, it is pretty balanced when you look at it overall. So in terms of where we decide to place our ads, from a GTE perspective, we are looking at weekly deliveries. So we book a TV campaign, and then we're monitoring it constantly and optimizing it on a weekly basis. So whichever program stations are performing the best, then we're up weighting on those stations, and then down weighting on the stations that don't perform as well. So it's a measurement loop that we're constantly tracking to ensure that we're putting the ads in front of the people that are seeing them, and you're going to get the strongest conversion.
Yeah, that's good. There's a real science to it, right? It's like, I think people maybe just assume that you give a network $250,000 and just splatter ads all over the place, but there is an art and science to it, isn't there?
Absolutely.
It used to be like that, Steve, in the good old days. Now we have to justify everything, but it's and that's important. I think it's sometimes you just have to think as well. It's all about, and you can get response from the strangest of places, and think about people's journeys and their days. And one of the strongest results I've ever seen was not on TV. Actually, it was for a sponsorship of a radio station in Toronto, Drive Time. And we had a client who was really reliant on VIPs in Ontario, hardly anything new in that space. But we ran a Drive Time sponsorship on a really large station in Toronto. And within 2 months, we brought down that cost per FTD by 30%. And the reliance that we'd introduced a whole new audience stream up to people. Now you would say, oh, but they can't advertise when they're driving home in their cars, or, they've got no means to do that. But what you're doing is you're hitting people as they, as on their way home, they get out of the car, they sit down, they stump in front of the telly, and they go, oh, I know what, let's just have a little go on the casino, see if we can make some money back from, and that's kind of how that's how you have to think about it. It's not just, yes, it's all about response and measuring that, but it's also common sense and thinking about how people, consume and use sports betting or casino advertising.
It just one last question, Nick. I just wonder, the U.S. is obviously a fascinating marketplace. 39 states, I think, with legal sports betting now. Only half a dozen or 7 states with legal online gaming. Are you doing much business in the U.S.?
No, not a huge amount. I'll be honest with you. It's so normally you kind of have to buy on a state by state basis. So where it is legal, that's where you can do it. It's very expensive to do that. I would say no. It's not a massive market for us at the moment. I think with prediction markets and sweeps, etc., it's going to become really interesting. And I prediction markets when you see. What was I seeing ad the other day? It was a social media ad with Trump promoting steak casino, essentially.
Right.
I mean, my God, what has the world come to? But anyway, that's what that's quite a scary space. And I think, and I'm just getting my head around that at the moment, to be honest with you, because I think it's the potential for harm out of prediction markets. It's so much higher than the normal iGaming, casino, or sportsbook advertising. So that's something I am, not only in terms of insider trading and the furore around Trump's family, etc., but just on what you can bet on. It's just a bit, not right sometimes.
Yeah, and Jenny, last question for you. I just wondered, because again, there's so much American influence on us, here in Ontario, we're watching, where I live in Kincardine, I'm watching the Detroit network affiliates. Where you are, you're probably getting the Buffalo affiliates. Like, does that translate at all into the media buying that you see from your clients, or what you see from the gambling industry?
Not really. I think we, being in this industry, we do see a lot coming from the US, but really, if you look at the tracking, you can track some of that through Numeris, which is the governing body for broadcast audiences in Canada. The input from the US is really quite small. So there's people that are watching CNN and other stations like that, but overall, from a macro perspective, the influence from the US is rather small. And given the climate right now, that's probably going to be shrinking over the next couple of years versus growing. So I think, there are challenges with our Canadian economy, but the US influence is not part of it.
Jenny Croswell is the Managing Director of GT Canada. Nick Wood is the Global Director of Client Strategy and Growth. Nick, I hope I got that right.
Yeah, sorry, bit of a mouthful.
This was really, really good to get the two of you on. It's the timing couldn't be better. It's always we do have a lot of listeners and watchers of this podcast who are media geeks like myself. So this was a fun conversation, and really appreciate the two of you making some time to join us today.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's been brilliant.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show, presented by Bede Gaming. As always, you can listen to this show on the various podcast apps. You can also watch our conversation with Nick and Jenny on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. We're always so grateful to all of our listeners, watchers, and also our subscribers to Gaming News Canada. Thanks once again for joining us, and we will see everybody again very soon.